Great. Mr. Pedro Paez. Mr. Pedro Paez Jaramillo was a Spanish Jesuit missionary in Ethiopia. Paez is considered by many experts on all things Ethiopian the absolute most effective Catholic missionary in Ethiopia. Furthermore, he is believed to be the first European to lay eyes on and describe the source of the Blue Nile. He was born in 1564 into a noble family in Olmeda de las Cebollas, a tiny village around 25 miles from Madrid. He studied at the University of Coimbra in Portugal, and at 18 years old he went aboard the Jesuit Society. Thereafter, he was sent to Goa, and after staying there a year, a trip to Ethiopia along with his fellow Jesuit Antonio de Montserrat was set up on direct orders from King Philip II. Disguised as Armenian merchants, they set off for Ethiopia, but whilst in Yemen they were betrayed by the very man who was supposed to take them on to Ethiopia. Taken as slaves and held captive for a grand total of 7 years, during which they were dragged from city to city, spending time in jail, trekking through the vast Rub al-Khali and Hadramaut deserts. Pedro Paez might even have been the first European to get his lips on mocha coffee. He was also able to get a grasp of Arabic. And while serving as rowers in the Red Sea, de Montserrat got seriously ill. Their ransom was paid and they were freed. Paez's companion died shortly after arriving back to India, and from India, Paez, whose health wasn't the finest, recovered, and 2 years later he was on his way back to Ethiopia with unfinished business on his mind. He finally got to Massawa, where he met up with the chief of the Portuguese representative in Ethiopia, John Gabriel. Upon arriving to the Negusa Nagast noble court, the Ethiopian Emperor Zardengal was astounded at his knowledge of the Amharic and Ge'ez languages, as well as at his knowledge of Ethiopian customs, and thus talked him into converting from the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church to Catholicism. Despite Paez warning the emperor not to announce the change too soon, Paez retired to Fremona, and this announcement in the end led to the outbreak of a civil war, ending up with the emperor's death. Paez turned out to be quite popular too with Zardengal's successor Susenyos I, Susenyos having granted land to the Jesuits and Paez. Susenyos finally announced his Catholicism 15 years after coronation. Paez passed away on May the 25th, 1622, shortly after converting Susenyos I, Emperor of Ethiopia, to Catholicism. He was buried beneath the land of the Church of Gordon that he had built and nowadays remains abandoned next to the source of the Nile. The source of the Nile that supposedly Pedro Paez reached 150 years prior to the Scot James Bruce doing so.